penalty for erratic driving decided the British Grand Prix as an aggrieved Oscar Piastri lost victory to teammate and title rival Lando Norris. John, this was at times a wet and wild Silverstone race that came down to one key moment, the restart, or to be specific, the moments leading up to the restart on lap 21 when Piastri's braking caught out Max Verstappen. So let's get right into the data because it earned Piastri a 10-second penalty and a couple of licence penalty points as well. What doomed Piastri? What did he do wrong?
Basically, the stewards deemed it erratic driving. Now, there are some rules in place for restart. So Oscar has the right to control the pace as the lead car, but doesn't allow you to have complete freedom. And it's all boils down to Article 55.15 of the sporting regulations that says from the point at which the lights of the car are turned out, drivers must proceed at a pace which involves no erratic acceleration or braking, nor any manoeuvre which is likely to endanger other drivers or impede the restart. In the stewards' verdicts, they said he braked at 59.2 psi. He decelerated from 218 kilometres an hour down to 52 kilometres an hour. In their viewpoint, it was clearly a breach of the rules.
Yeah, Verstappen had to take evasive action to avoid a collision, is what the stewards said. So we've got some more data that we've dug into to explain this. To get into that, Piastri argued the timing was coincidental. It wasn't a reaction to the safety car lights. And basically, he'd already started braking, and then once he saw that the race was about to restart and he could control the pace, he just didn't speed up. And that he did exactly the same thing on the previous restart 4 laps earlier. But as I say, we've dug into that as well. And John, Piastri's right, he did do the same thing, but he might have just got lucky the first time.
Yeah, there are similar data points. We looked at the telemetry upstairs. So lap 17 restart, the safety car lights actually go out at Chapel this time rather than halfway down the hangar straight just past the bridge. So on that occasion, he decelerates from 208 kilometres an hour down to 51 kilometres an hour. So very, very similar scenario. We've seen the onboard. Max again has to brake to avoid overtaking him. And there is a bit of a bunch up behind. You see the cars all bunch up behind. Yeah, it's fine, there was no breach that time, but we understand that race control was alerted to this. It did look at it. They thought, is there a potential breach here? They were happy at the time to let it go. They let it go, but when it happened again on lap 21, I think that triggered the decision to, this time we're gonna have a proper look at it.
Yeah, you could see as well in the data that Verstappen himself had to slow down more the second time. He'd obviously, the first time he'd avoided going past Piastri, the second time around caught out so much that actually he did overtake the McLaren, had to give the place back. I think that's more why you can see in the data that he holds a very low speed for a while. The actual slowing down is he's clearly been caught out more, and that is probably because it all happens a little bit later in the straight and Max thinks that Piastri is going. So it is worth flagging what Max thought of this, because at the time he obviously complained on the radio immediately afterwards, whoa mate, Jesus, he just again suddenly slows down. After the race, he said something interesting, John.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And you've got to recall, we need to rewind to Canada, obviously, with Max and George Russell behind the safety car. So he said, it's happened to me now a few times, this kind of scenario. I just find it strange that then suddenly now Oscar is the first one to receive 10 seconds for it. And then they asked him, what's the difference between what happened in Canada with you and George and what happened here with Oscar? He says, was it different? He said to the stewards, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So very much, you can interpret that very strongly as Verstappen not saying that Piastri didn't deserve a penalty this time, but Russell did in Canada. So let's talk about that Canada comparison, because that is another thing that aggrieved Piastri. He claimed that Verstappen didn't have to evade him, as the steward said, and compared it to Verstappen and Russell in Canada, saying that actually Verstappen had to do more avoiding there. He said he was a bit confused, to say the least, as a result of that. But this wasn't like for like with Russell a couple of races ago, was it?
No, there's two clear differences. The first one, on data terms, Russell's deceleration was much, much less in Canada. We're talking 140 kilometres an hour down to 85 kilometres an hour. And the braking pressure was 30 psi. That's not it's almost, well, just over half what they claimed Oscar Piastri had today. But the critical difference is, in that scenario, the safety car lights were still on. So you're in a scenario where drivers are accelerating, decelerating, and you're pretty much allowed to do that as long as you're within this distance from the car ahead.
And the delta time as well that you respect.
And the delta time. So there's lots of elements, but there is a critical difference between the lights on safety car, what you can do. What lights go off, that Article 55.15 kicks in, where you're not allowed to do erratic acceleration or braking.
Yeah, look, I have some sympathy for Piastri and McLaren, who also disagree with this. I think you can argue that there is an element of feeling hard done by, given that he did very, very similar thing a few laps before and didn't get a punishment for it. But you can also see why he's banged to rights if you want to apply those rules and need to apply those rules very strictly. The issue that it has with a car having to take evasive action, movement with the pack behind, these restarts have to be controlled safely. So I don't think it's not that they had no choice, but I think once they'd already seen it once, as you say, very different to what happened a couple of races ago, this is its own scenario. I think I can see why it's the correct decision. So obviously, as I've said, Piastri didn't agree with the decision. McLaren felt it was harsh as well. You heard from team boss Andrea Stella-John. We actually bumped into him as we were on our way out of the media centre to record this video too. Why does McLaren feel aggrieved? Because when there was gamesmanship at play when the Russell Verstappen thing happened in Canada, or allegedly from Red Bull side, and they were hinted at that from McLaren, right?
Yeah, Andrea Stella was late for the press conference with us tonight, 25 minutes late. He apologised. He said he wanted to go and look at the telemetry again, look at the video again, and he's stuck by his opinion. He felt it was a very harsh decision. He felt the PSI the stewards used wasn't anything extraordinary. It's kind of within the normal realms of what drivers do. He also thinks that situations were different between, say, lap 17 and lap 21. The safety car lights had come off very late. And in that scenario, Oscar had cold tyres, had cold brakes, needed to warm everything up. So it was kind of under pressure to get some heat in, which explains that. And thirdly, very interestingly, he said we need to kind of understand if there's a bit of gamesmanship from the rival here. Did Max make a meal of it? They want to look at the telemetry. They want to discuss things just to work out, are drivers deliberately causing a bit of trouble to make it look worse than it is? So they're not happy. McLaren's not happy with what it is. They want to speak to the FIA. As we were getting ready to film here, we've just seen Mark Webber, Piastri's manager, and Randy, their strategist, speaking to one of the stewards, just having a chat. We don't know what they're talking about, couldn't listen into it, but we saw some
exchanging dinner plans,
hand movements like this, which I think is all about the safety car restart.
Yeah, exactly. It's very clear that they can't take any recourse on this. First of all, there's a time penalty in the race, and it's not that you can appeal that decision or anything like that. There's no gain to be had here by filing a completely spurious right of review attempt or anything. It will just be informal conversations like the one that we've literally just seen in the paddock to make sure that they understand everything going forward. Now, this did decide the race. We said that at the very top. Norris was quicker in the second half of the Grand Prix. Piastri was fantastic when it was at its wettest early on, but overcoming track position, had he stayed behind Piastri, would have been difficult. And that's why Piastri made a bit of a half-hearted attempt to request that McLaren swap the positions back and then let them race if they felt the penalty was wrong. Now, he admitted that wouldn't have been fair to Norris, but he had to at least ask. What did Stella have to say about this? Did McLaren give any thought to doing that?
Yeah, it was interesting, because it wasn't an automatic, once the penalty was in, it wasn't automatic that Oscar would lose the lead. Andrea said something very interesting. So if it had been a safety car, if a safety car had come out, they would have pitted those two cars in their order, because they would have double stacked them because they had such a gap to the car behind. So they would have left the pit lane in the order they came in. So it effectively means that if the safety car had come out, Oscar wouldn't have lost the lead because of it. But once they're into the pit stops related to tyres, once they're into the pit stops kind of related to the race playing out normally, that's why they had to invert positions, because you're into a different scenario. We can't afford to give up time to the cars behind them.
Yeah, Norris admitted this wasn't the best way to win a race, and maybe not his favourite. We'll wrap up very quickly so we don't get run over by any vehicles that are cleaning up in the paddock. What does this mean for the championship? It's obviously a fourth win for Norris. Piastri still has 5, and he still has an 8-point championship lead. Piastri says it doesn't change much, and he'll use the frustration to make sure I win more races later. But it's a bit more momentum to Norris, isn't it? Back-to-back race victories and obviously a win on home soil.
Yeah, I think it's a little chip. But even after Canada, when a lot of people were writing off Lando Norris's championship hopes, Oscar said it's far from over. It takes 3 wins. He's back in the game. He's got 2 of those wins now. Everything's still to play for. And Oscar, we've got to remember, he's very calculating, very intelligent. He will look at today. He'll learn from it. He will make sure that Mark Webber does everything with the stewards. He'll make sure McLaren probe stuff. He'll want to know where the limits are. We saw in Saudi Arabia this year, he fully understood the driver guidelines, fully understand what is allowed, what isn't allowed. He will come out of this knowing what happens next time in the safety car. And he's not the driver who makes the same mistake twice.
No, exactly. And Norris, he's shown today that he can win on his bad days, but Piastri will take a silver lining from this as well, which was he was plenty fast enough to win this one.